Okay. David, are you there? Hey, David, are you there? ？Can you hear me?
David, please unmute.
是不是可以让天天给他解禁一下
OK，他现在已经解禁了。
Can you hear me
？OK,
now?
yeah,
好了
yeah,
好
I
了，
can hear you. OK, yeah. 各位同学，各位老师哈，各位朋友，大家好啊！今天我们这个非常荣幸的请到戴维施沃伦博士啊，给我们做精彩的分享啊。我呢认识施沃伦博士已经有20年了，所以就是我觉得由我来介绍还是比较合适的啊，合适的。这个施沃伦博士，大家因为关于他的这个简介呀、介绍啊，大家看这个 flyer 上面啊，就已经有了哈，已经有了。这个海报上啊，就请你上网也可以检索到不少关于他的信息哈，我就不用念了哈，我就要是讲2点，这个他对我的印象比较深刻的哈，一个就是说他这些年推动企业社会责任哈。就是他自己是一个知行合一的人啊，也可以说他这是，如果说大家说英文有个词叫 gentleman 啊，这个词不好理解的话，你就看看这个施沃伦这个为人吧，就能感受得到。我还记得他每次到中国，因为大部分都是我在这个接待哈，我觉得每次订宾馆可以看出来，因为我们中国人嘛，肯定我们要搞第一，我们要便宜，对吧？第二，我们要性价比要高，是吧？住的还要豪华，还要好，还要便宜。但是呢，这个我发现这个明明有性价比高的，他不去住，他却住那些在我看来比较贵的哈。我这是什么逻辑哈？有钱你不省吗？啊？难道钱多的发烧吗？结果是怎么回事呢？结果他说这些宾馆都属于企业社会责任宾馆啊，都是讲究企业社会责任的。我住进去之后，虽然多花一点钱，但是我等于支持了他们这个企业，这样那个好的企业越来越多，这样的最后呢，就是这样的，慢慢的社会就往其他人向这个好的企业学习，社会慢慢就走向这个了，就所谓我们所说的，不是这个由良币驱劣币，而不是劣币驱良币啊，是这么个思路啊。这是我觉得他这个给我印象特别深，这个哈为人处事啊哈，他们当年开公司的时候也说，就是说这个永远给员工的永远要高于他们所预期的，我觉得这个很了不起啊，不像我们好多企业家尽可能的克扣员工的工资，能少给一点儿哈，这是两个思路啊。第二就是说这个第二个给我印象比较深的话，这个就是他对中国这种感情啊，这种我曾经写过一篇文章，就叫《杨如商的中国情》啊，这个可能是樊老师已经放上去了啊，就说这个大家可以看一下，因为他很小的时候，他老说就是这个他不住在费城吗？他喜欢在费城的海边儿啊。一个小的小男孩喜欢拿一条铲子那挖，你知道大家男孩喜欢在挖洞嘛哈，在海边挖洞，他爸爸就跟他说，如果你这么一直挖下去的话吧，有一天你就会挖到中国了。所以小小的这个石油人脑子里就有这么个概念哈，就是说我中国呀，我只要挖下去啊，所以从小就梦想着来中国。2001年啊，由于他那个书出版了啊，《财富准则》哈，在中国出版了，由那原来我在中国社会科学院嘛，中国社会科学出版社出的，中国社科文献出版社出的，然后他到中国去也算推动这个书吧，推广这个书吧。所以就是到了中国，算第一次到中国啊，非常兴奋啊！我还记得当初安排在那个中共中央党校演讲啊，看到门口这个还有警卫、解放军拿着刺刀站岗， 他们夫妻俩觉得特别惊奇哈，咱们学校还有人站岗了哈。他不知道我们这个党校不同于这个一般的学校啊，挺有意思，好多文化上的差异哈。还有人吧觉得党校以为就是吃喝玩乐那种地方啊，就是大家知道 party 嘛这个词哈，还是派对嘛。所以有时候好像文化上的差异很有意思。他对中国这种感情的话，从小埋下来了，所以他以后有8、9次。David，how many times did you visit China？
9 times.
行呀，9次啊，访问中国哈、就是这样的话，足迹啊深入大江南北啊，所以就是这个在中国他有许多许多朋友啊，所以就是这个，所以使他感觉相当于中国是他的第二故乡吧啊，故乡，所以他一直也关心中国的这个生态文明建设啊，中国的发展啊，所以为什么上次咱们这个习总啊到美国来，在白宫晚宴啊，他亲自去捧场啊，去欢迎啊。显示他一个美国公民对中国的热情啊。还有一点，我想强调一下，他自己的人生，就是你看出他这个转向，早期当然就是要 make living 了，要挣钱，要治生嘛哈。然后后来就推动这个企业社会责任，后来发现仅仅让企业强调责任还是不够，如果是在观念上、在理念上、在思想上、在哲学上你不变革的话，尽管外来的好多这个条款呐、好多规则呀，你还可以偷偷去往河里放污水嘛？啊，为了减少企业的这个花费啊耗费，所以如果你从理念上、观念上认识到了啊这样做不对，尽管没有一些条文管你，没有警察盯着你，你依然会自觉的行使你的社会责任或者生态责任啊。所以他后来又走向这个心路治疗 （path work） 啊，英文叫 path work，就来推动这个人的观念上的变革啊。所以你看出他的思路这一步一步啊，这个逻辑上是很清楚的啊。所以今天呢，我们这个非常荣幸能够请到这个这样一位当代的思想家，既是企业家，也是思想家，也是心理学家。所以我们所谓喜欢樊老师，我们喜欢管他叫通人嘛啊，这样一种也是 American gentleman 啊，美国的绅士。所以我就如果大家有什么问题，等演讲完之后，欢迎大家提问。他是非常喜欢回答问题，人非常亲和。让我们掌声欢迎啊，Dr. David Schwerin 哈。
Someone. Well, good morning, everyone. Xie Guan Lin. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to speak to you today. As you can see, we have a big topic, and it's all about what's happening today, why it's happening, and how to fix things toward an ecological civilization. And let's start with just defining what an ecological civilization is, at least in my terms.
呀，首先呢，谢谢大家光临哈啊，非常荣幸能够来这里跟大家分享啊。就是今天我选择的话题是个非常大的话题啊，就是当今之事啊，到底是发生了什么啊？我们如何应对啊？如何走向生态文明？首先我们看看什么是生态文明啊，这是我个人的理解。Go ahead。
So, to me, an ecological civilization is one where all institutions are rebuilt on a firmer foundation, both economically, socially, and financially, where special interests give way to working for the common good of all living beings. Long-term peace, harmony, cooperation, and sharing becomes the benchmark upon which all organizations are measured, rather than short-term, short-sighted objectives of most actors today. Two.
呀，我所理解的生态文明呢，是这样一种文明，就是各个机构、每个人、每个组织机构都要把自己的这个基础建立在可持续的理念基础上啊，要为此呢，我们要进行社会的、经济的、环境方面的变革，也包括我们个体的，从根本上要进行变革，要建立一种长远的，而不是短视的。这样一种思路啊。Go ahead。
So that's at the organizational level. At the individual level, all society's citizens take personal responsibility for the planet's well-being, rather than looking to others to rectify our self-created problems. Self-knowledge is the key to success and happiness, as all beings do their part to nurture and heal Mother Earth.
就是这个不仅呢，生态文明呢，不仅强调各个机构啊、各个单位、各个组织要做出改变、做出贡献，也特别强调每个个体要担当起责任来啊，是每个人都要对这个我们这个星球做出贡献，做出负责，做一个有负责任的公民。
So now that we have some definitions down and understanding, let's see what's happening.
要
And it's really
是
the,
要这样的话呢，就是个体呢，就首先呢，我们要了解看一下这个世界到底今天在发生什么啊？
so it's really no surprise. I think everybody realized we're going through a pandemic. We're living through a period when there are significant economic damage to the planet, and we're facing climate change. All of that's alerting us to dangers if we do not make changes.
今
Being
天呢，
challenged,
大家知道今天的这个疫情啊，是这么全球的这个新冠大流行，还有这个气候变化啊，还有这个各种各样的这个环境污染啊，这些问题呢，其实对我们都是一个警报、警示。警示什么呀？警示危险来临，警示我们需要做出改变。Go ahead, David.
in effect, we're being challenged to pause and reflect on the world that we have created. Is the world functioning as effectively and humanely as we'd like? What positive impact could we have in these dangerous times? And how can we help the many people who are confused and upset?
就是说呢，这样的话，就是说这样这些灾难的这些危机的警示呢，其实是挑战我们，让我们停下来，慢下来，反思一下，哈，这个反思一下我们自己，反思一下这个世界啊，就是这个世界呢，到底是运行良好呢，还是这个世界呢出现了问题啊，还是一种功能失调，还是不能够按人性的思路来运行啊？那这样的话，就是说呢，这个我们这个有许多人呢对今天世界的变化感到困惑，还有些人呢感到很愤怒、生气啊。Go ahead。
So, what's happening is no accident. To quote from Pathwork, which I'll explain in a minute, law and order prevail throughout the universe. Every act has its consequences. This is a quote from Pathwork Lectures. And
如果
it
如果你
really
要
is
问，如
saying,
果你 Go ahead。
it's really saying every cause has an effect, and that's what we're experiencing today. Go ahead.
如果你要问我的话，是有一个基本的回答的话呢，从我们那个心路治疗的角度来说呢，我想说的是呢，没有一个事情是偶然的，有结果必一定有原因啊，事出有因啊，就是这样的话，这个宇宙啊，是这个每一个行动都必然有一个结果，这是一个宇宙的法则。Go ahead。
So, because I mentioned the pathwork and quoted from it, I just want to give you a very brief description of what pathwork is, so you know where a lot of the information in this presentation comes from. And pathwork is a psycho-spiritual body of work that draws on wisdom from the East and the West. It presents a practical understanding of life and its many challenges. And its material has been updated for today's circumstances. And I'll augment Pathwork material with other ancient wisdom and enlightened guidance. Go ahead.
就是这个，刚才我谈到了这个心路治疗哈，它是一个当代西方的一个心理学流派哈，它是这个古老的东方智慧跟这个西方智慧的整合哈，它代表了一种实际的对生活的理解啊， 而且对挑战的理解。所以就是这个他的这个今天人们的很多实践跟智慧呢，也强化了这样一种这样一种心理流派。Go ahead。
The essence of ancient wisdom is know thyself. This has been asked of us for a long time, many thousands of years. And to boil it down to its simplest components, that means to be aware of what you're thinking and doing, and maybe more importantly, understand why you're thinking and doing as you do. What are your feelings and motivations for your actions? Because we can't change anything unless we're aware of and understand the beliefs and behaviors that are causing us to do whatever it is we're doing or thinking. And the ultimate goal is to know who you are and why you're here. Go ahead.
在这个施沃伦博士看来呢，这些古老智慧的本质呢，就是要认识你自己，也就我们中国人喜欢说了解你自己，或者中国人说自知，是吧？老子不也说嘛，知人者力，自知者强啊。那你也就意识到，能够有意识的意识到你正在想什么，你正在做什么啊，不是说糊里糊涂的做事情，而是有意识的意识到你在做什么。而且这样的话呢，就是说你也对你的自己的这种动机、你的情感有一种觉知啊。这样的话，他的一个基本思路就是说，除非你能够意识到这一切，否则的话也不可能做出改变。那最终目的是什么呢？最终目的是要了解你是谁，为什么你要来到这里？用咱们的话说，就是说最终你要意识到你的使命。你今生的使命。现在不好多年轻人不就是人生没有意义吗？找不到目标吗？就是因为缺了这么一环认识到你是谁，你为什么来到这里，人生的意义在哪里，目的，你的今生的使命Go ahead。
So when you engage in in learning about yourself and studying yourself, you first may not recognize what you see in the mirror because there's going to be some traits that you have that you're not very pleased about. That's the case for everybody. And it quite frankly is why people shy away from doing deep work on self-knowledge. But until you know yourself and you know why you're doing things, you'll end up making the same mistakes over and over again. And so this is a really important aspect of your growth and your learning. Go ahead.
就是大家可能以为这个self knowledge 自我认识自知是比较简单的，其实不是那么简单的。这里面经常有些幻觉有些误解在里面。比如说，就像这个猫它在镜子里看着觉得自己是个狮子、老虎这个经常就说这个人们有时候我们包括我们自己，有时候我们对自己的认知定位。也是自己有时候有些人自己感觉自己非常良好觉得自己几乎是世界上完美的人，可是社会别人不这么看他，之间是有这么一个差距的，所以认识自己其实是一件很难的事情Go ahead。
So I want to start as we get into this by outlining some key concepts that we'll use as we go through this presentation. And the first one is something very simple. Everything is interconnected and interdependent. I'm sure you've heard that before, but it really is a key to everything else that follows. And because everything's interdependent and interconnected, we create our own reality. How do we do that? Through everything we think, everything we say, everything we do. We are spiritual beings having a physical experience. That's really important because generally people think it's the other way around. We're physical beings who occasionally have a spiritual experience. And it really makes a great difference in everything you think about and do in your life. Go ahead, Ju.
就是这个呢，今天演讲有几个核心的理念，大家可以记一下。第一条呢，就是说万物都是互联的，大家可能都知道了而且万物呢都是互依的，万物互联，万物互依。 第二呢，就是我们创造了我们自己的实相啊，这个大家也应该也能够理解，创造了现实。今天这个世界污染成这个样子，你不能说只怪别人啊，我们自己，你有没有什么乱点外卖呀？有没有乱扔这个塑料袋儿啊？是吧？有没有疯狂的购物啊？所以我们每个人都是有责任的。今天这个地球污染成这个样子，我们每个人都有责任啊。第三呢，就是说我们不仅是个物体的存在，我们也是个精神的存在啊。就是说这个不仅仅是行尸走肉了，我们也是一个灵魂的有高尚的存在，是有精神的啊。还有就是说，今天这个技术啊发展的太快了，已经在这个步伐呀有点太快了啊，超越了人们的这个精神的觉知啊。最后一条就是说呢，我们的恐惧往往阻止了我们过一种幸福的生活、快乐的生活。你不能想象一个人生活在恐惧中的人会感到幸福快乐，那这个恐惧是个罪魁祸首啊。Go ahead, David.
Uh, two other very important concepts that I didn't cover yet are that technological advances are outpacing our spiritual awareness. We rely too much, in other words, on technology to solve our problems. But the key to our problems is inside of us, our beliefs and our thoughts and our actions because of our beliefs. So we need to use technology where it's appropriate because it can be helpful, but it's not something that we can rely on to solve our deepest problems. And the last point is that our fears, and we all have them, prevent us from living a happy life. And I'll get more into that as we go along. Jihu?
就是这个，刚才又补充了一下哈，就是说关于说这个，其实用咱们话说就是技术崇拜啊。我们老向外在的寻求解决问题的方案，特别是依赖于这个科技能够帮助我们解决这个困境哈。其实他觉得这个是不对的，我们应该向内寻求啊，向内寻求。Go ahead.
Okay, now that we've looked at some concepts, let's look at some principles that we'll be using as we go along. The first is that the universe works best when it's in balance. And that's been said by many people for a long time. Secondly, everything is constantly moving, constantly changing. And that again is something that's well known, that is important. And because everything's moving, everything is changing, and change is inevitable. And that means that the status quo, which we all tend to like to stick to, is impossible. And crises arise as distorted beliefs and misconceptions are blindly followed. In other words, if you don't make up your own mind, but listen to somebody else and follow them, that's when we get in trouble. And repeated thoughts mold our beliefs. And these are beliefs that lead to our behavior and to either good or bad outcomes. Jude?
这里呢也有几个这个核心的这个原则哈。第一条的话呢，就是宇宙什么时候运行最良好啊？就是当它保持平衡的时候是最良好啊。就是然后呢，就是一切都是在恒长的运动过程中就不断变化的啊，变化是不可避免的。大家其实也理解为什么这些年我们跟戴维·施文博士合作这么紧密。因为他也是，我们也把他也看作一个过程思想家啊，强调万物节流，一切皆变啊，这是过程思想的一个核心理念嘛啊。就是说呢，还有一个很重要，就是保持现状是不可能的。我觉得这话特别重要啊，许多人老想着维持现状啊，这个包括今天好多人还是寄希望于这个新冠赶快过去，我们回到以前的旧生活。我告诉同志们，不可能了啊，这是不可能了啊！你要适应这新的变化啊。还有呢，最后也很重要，就是说这个危机啊，来自于好多这种错误的、曲折的这种信念啊、信仰，而这些信念呢，又来自于这个坊间的一些你相信别人的一些误传的一些理念啊，就盲目的追随别人，别人做什么你也做什么。这个呢是往往容易形成这样自己的这种不思考。盲目追随别人，也是导致一种错误的结局的一种原因啊。Go ahead。
because our beliefs play such an important part in everything that happens in our life, I found this quote to be extremely important. And it says, if we continue to believe as we've always believed, we'll continue to act as we've always acted. If we continue to act as we've always acted, we'll continue to get what we've always gotten. In other words, we have to look at our beliefs closely because they will determine what happens in our life. And if they're not accurate, and many of our beliefs aren't, then we'll get things that we really don't want. Go ahead.
那个这里呢，David 舒文博士非常喜欢这个这样一个这些金句哈，因为各位好多都学过英文，像这些话大家可以背一下啊，非常好，也非常管用啊。就是如果你继续相信你曾经相信的话，就是这样的话，你会继续呢做你以前这么经常做的经常做的，这样的话你也会继续得到呢你所得到的。其实用我们的话说，其实问题不在于危机出现，是在于你用旧逻辑来看新的危机。也就是说，爱因斯坦说的，你用这个产生问题的这种思维，不可能解决任何问题。所以你要改变你的这种新的思维改变你的认知，我觉得这个很重要。Go ahead.
So now I want to look more deeply at some of these principles that we discussed. The first one being balance. Balance keeps the universe intact. As I mentioned before, that's something that's been discussed by people for thousands of years. Being in equilibrium, following the middle path, things of that sort. But when we're in balance, things are going well. When they get out of balance, we have distortions and disease created. And it's important to reestablish balance, but this takes time and effort. Just as it took time to get out of balance, it takes time to get back into balance. So I suggest maybe you make this practical and bring it down to your personal lives. Just look at some of the things that go on in your life and see how balanced they are. Say, for instance, your relationships, are they harmonious? Your money, giving it and receiving it, how balanced is that? Some people find it easier to receive, some people find it easier to give. And your connection to nature, do you tend to exploit nature, take from it, or do you tend to nurture it and give back to it? Jew?
就是这个呢，核心的理念呢，其中第一条呢，核心的原则就是这个平衡而且大家刚才这个很重要，因为正是这个平衡呢，使这个宇宙保持运行良好而不平衡呢，却导致了曲扭跟混乱跟失序而重新确定这个平衡呢，需要花一点时间，需要花出努力不是说自然就回来了还需要你做出努力就是那么这个你怎么能检测你的生活是平衡的还是失衡的话呢？你就看一看你的这个关系，你跟他人的关系跟家庭的关系，你跟你的情人的关系是不是和谐的如果和谐的话，是说明是平衡的包括对金钱的态度，你是仅仅把钱搂在自己腰包里呢，还是也给出去？如果只是这个挣钱不给出钱去，说明是不平衡的而且包括还有我们跟自然的关系，如果我们仅仅是剥夺自然剥削自然，而不是滋养自然，说明也是不平衡的所以一定是有挣钱就要给钱这样的话给予，这样的话才显示是一种平衡对于自然也是这样，我们仅仅是砍树，我们不种树，这就是失衡了Go ahead, David.
All right, we looked at balance. Now let's take a little deeper look at the fact that everything is constantly moving and vibrating. Now we are obvious that on a physical standpoint, everything moves either on the land or in the sea or in the air. And we constantly hone that skill. But movement occurs not only in the physical level, but on the emotional level as we mature and move from a reactive state to a responsive state where we think about things before we react, to the mental level where intellectual development occurs throughout our life from when we're very young to when we get older and go to college and maybe graduate school, and then we just continue with lifelong learning. And even on the spiritual level, the non-material aspects of life move. As we get older, we're more interested in concepts and things like loving, giving, non-judgment, forgiving, compassion, things that are immaterial and spiritual in nature. They grow in importance in our life. Jew?
刚才不是说这个过程这些讲究是万物急流，一切皆变吗？这个变不仅是物理的世界在改变，这个情感的世界也在变化，而且精神的世界也在变化，灵性的世界也在变化。包括我觉得大家，比如说你没有听今天演讲之前，你的这个精神的层面在这个层面上，你听完之后，你提高另一个层面了，你更愿意付出啊，愿意帮助他人啊。愿意变得更加慈悲了啊，更加具有一种同情心、同理心，就说明你的灵性上、精神上也提升了，也在变了。所以就是这个变化是全方位的啊。Go ahead。
We talk about spiritual progression and movement. A quote here from Confucius, who says, "The power of spiritual forces in the universe, how active it is everywhere." So this is, again, something that is universal and widely accepted.
那个
Now,
施
the
文
next
博士很
principle,
喜，
I'm
施
sorry, go
文
ahead.
博士很喜欢那个儒家的思想哈，他觉得他也刚才引了那个孔子的一个说法，在这个在《中庸》中谈到这个精神的力量啊，遍布宇宙啊，宇宙并不仅仅是物质的东西，它也有精神的力量在里面啊，所以这个人就我们中国人老说人活一口气马活一张皮。人的精神很重要啊，一个人有没有精神气质，是你值得你跟他交往的一个重要的依据啊。Go ahead。
Okay, so we've talked about movement, we've talked about balance, and now the next principle is change. Change, everything is constantly changing. And when we accept the change, we're in harmony with it, we flow with it. When we resist it, disharmony occurs. And when imbalances from change become extreme, a crisis arises. It forces us to pay attention. So this is
就是说，
a
这个
natural.
刚才说这个变化呢是不可避免的啊，这是也是过程这是一个核心的理念。那对这个变化是什么态度呢？如果你接受这个变化，那就是导致和谐；如果你抗拒变化啊，那就是导致不和谐啊。这样的话，就说那个最终呢，就会有一种以产生危机的方式啊，逼迫你不得不注意啊，否则的话就是你意识不到啊。通过这样一种出现危机，是逼迫你来意识到这个问题发生了变化啊。就像我们这个人类还在那狂争乱伐这个自然哈、那么对待自然啊，自然一次一次呐喊你听不见，那最终要通过一些灾难的形式使你注意到这个问题啊。Go ahead。
So we started out by talking about the fact that we're faced multiple crises. And it's important to understand that crises are natural whenever an imbalance gets extreme. It's nature's attempt to change things, to bring us back to balance. And the intensity of the crisis shows the urgency of the need for change. Our ecological systems are in crisis. I think everybody realizes that. Hurricanes, fires, floods are all intensifying. And it's important for us to pay attention and make the changes that we need to make, or the crisis will get worse. Jill?
就是这里呢，施文博士谈到这个怎么理解危机啊？危机不一定是坏东西啊，它其实像我们身体得病了，它是一种症状啊，它告诉你你的身体出了问题。这个我们地球的危机是告诉我们这个地球出了问题。 这样的话，就说包括今天这个飓风啊、大火、这个洪水啊，这些这个持续的发生啊，这些危机越多越强，就说明你的问题越多越急迫啊，其实是一种警告。Go ahead。
So crises are really important and they play a critical role in the evolution of humanity. They force us to pay attention. And some of the things that they're asking us to pay attention to is the arising inequality and the conflicts that will come from that increasing spread between the rich and the poor. The fact that ecosystems are ignored and are constantly degraded, and that's going to have consequences we don't like. And finally, another one, and this is just three very prominent ones, is on the financial front. And this is generally not talked about a lot, but there is extreme indebtedness throughout the world and throughout different segments of society as people have borrowed money in order to pay their bills and in some cases to live beyond their means. And this is going to harm us as we go forward because we need financial resources, among other things, to clear up and satisfy all these environmental, like climate change and the pandemic and the ecosystem. All those things need resources, and we're running out of them as we go into debt further and further. So these are things that need to be paid attention to and changed and rectified, and it needs to be done pretty quickly. Go ahead, Judy.
呀，下面这些这个危机的话呢，都是危机的一些表现啊，需要引起我们的注意。比如说这个日益这个增强的这个不平等啊，这贫富的差距就导致冲突了。这个仇富情节就是一个表现，对吧？还有这个生物系统啊，这日益恶化啊，还有像这个资金上啊、财务上这样极端的欠债啊，包括我们这几年前有些公司推动这个花呗、贷呗，你明明没钱的大学生，你给他贷那么多钱，他欠那么多债，这一辈子就背上了啊。所以这样的话，导致好多悲剧的发生啊，这都是有问题的啊。Go ahead。
Okay, so now let's put this into some context and see the importance of it and how we can move forward despite the problems that we face. So the flow of universal laws is as follows. First, everything's in balance. Then, because there's movement, things get out of balance and they change. The imbalances arise, and if not corrected in time, a crisis will arise to force us to make the changes that are necessary. Unfortunately, human beings resist correcting what things that need to be corrected due to fears that they have. So we'll talk about that in a minute because it's very crucial to what's going on in the world and how we're going to fix things. Jill?
在这个施沃伦博士看来呢，危机的一个最大的功能，就是什么呢？就是强迫我们做出改变啊。如果你不愿意自愿做出改变的话，那么通过危机的形式来强迫你做出改变。那么为什么人们拒绝改变呢？在他看来，一个重要原因就源于我们的恐惧，源于恐惧。Go ahead。
So let's look at our fears because they play such an important role in everything we do, whether we realize it or not. And this may not translate real well, but I think it's very interesting to think about. The four letters that make up the word fear in English, F-E-A-R, stand for false evidence appearing real. And that's what most of our fears are. Some of them are real, and that's if we're being chased by a wild animal, obviously, it creates fear of our survival, and that's a real fear. But a false or illusory fear is when we worry about the past, which is no longer in existence, or think about the future. And the future, of course, is unknown. So fear is something that you have to really look at and understand to see where it's coming from, because it is humanity's greatest enemy. Fear is. Jew?
呀，就是这里的，因为大家懂英文的，一看就明白了。fair FEAR 哈，其实什么意思呢？就是由这么个4个东西单词组成的，就是显示出真的虚假证据啊，就虚假证据它是貌似真的，就导致了 fear 啊恐惧啊。其实这个呢，然后他认为这个恐惧呢是人类的最大的敌人啊。Go ahead。
So let's look a little deeper at some of the things we fear, because as I said, this plays a big part in everything we think and do. So what are some of the major fears that we all have? First is the fear of failure. And failure is not as devastating as we make it out to be. None of us are perfect. And we learn from our failures. So that's one question you have to ask yourself. When you fear failure, is it really something that is worth worrying about? Second is fear of loss, losing something we have or losing the opportunity to get something we want. Then there's the fear of the unknown. Then the fear of losing control. And we'll talk about each of these in a second, a little more depth. And then finally, the fear of being alone. So we'll look at the truth of this in just a second. How many of these fears are real, valid fears? Jew?
那个呢，那么都有哪些东西令我们感到恐惧呢？首先是失败，大家知道没人愿意成为 loser 啊，失败者啊，输家都愿意成为赢家，担心失败。第二，担心失去啊，就像这个，然后呢就是这个，还有呢担心未知的东西啊，未知的东西往往使我们感到恐惧啊，不了解它们。还有呢，担心失去呢控制啊。我们希望我们都掌控局面啊！一旦事情不像按我们的意愿走的话，我们就感到恐惧、害怕。还有呢是担心的话呢，恐惧、孤独啊、孤单啊，这也是所以希望能够3天小宴5日大宴，天天能够有 party 才好呢，热闹啊，这都是恐惧的结果。Go ahead。
Okay, let's look at the truth now behind our fears and see just how much validity they have. First of all, the fear of failure. Well, we all make mistakes. None of us are perfect, but we learn from everything. And some people say that until you've made a mistake and failed, you really haven't learned anything, and you really can't be successful. So you can look at that first fear and throw it out, because the fear of failure is not really something that is important in our life. The second is the fear of loss. Well, loss is natural because we're going to lose from the day we're born, we start losing things. But everything we lose leads to our growth, to learning something new and experiencing something new. The unknown provides new experiences. Think how boring it would be if everything was known and there were no surprises or opportunities for growth. The fourth one is that fear of losing control. Well, the fact is we're not in control. We have very little control. We've never had control. So we need to trust. And we need to trust that the universe is friendly. And in fact, as you do your inner work, you'll find that that is accurate, that we're being helped all the time. We don't often see it, and sometimes the things we receive are different than we said we wanted, or they happen at a different time, but everything is here to help us. And finally, being all alone is actually a misunderstanding, because we're all connected. We're never alone. Everything works together. It appears that we're separate, but that's not the reality. So that we're never alone, and that create a fear for us. Jehu?
就是这个，而这个心路治疗让我们怎么看待这些问题呢？首先，你要意识到，不存在任何一个错误，其实都是你一个学习的机会啊，学习的机会啊，不存在这绝对意义上的错误啊，所以你犯了点错误没有关系啊，考试这次没考好也没有关系啊，所以就是这些呢，都是你那个一个成长的一个机会啊，还有那个损失的话呢。也是自然的啊，自然的，因为只有这个损失呢，才能导致你成长。如果小鸡儿呢，永远在那个鸡蛋壳里的话呢，不丢掉不损失这个鸡蛋壳，它就不可能茁壮成长，长成小鸡儿啊。包括我们也是这样。我们如果永远在我们妈妈的肚子里那么温暖的地方啊，不愿意出来的话，我们也不会长大啊，一样的。所以其实它是一个成长的机会啊。还有就是说这个未知的东西的话呢，其实给你提供了一种新的体验、新的经验啊，我也不是坏事儿。还有就是说呢。你不要指望呢，你永远可以可以控制一切啊，没有人可以控制一切啊，所以就是还有就是说那个关于那个孤独的话呢，你不要觉得自己孤独，你永远不会孤独，为什么呢？因为万物互联，我们跟整个宇宙是连在一起的，我们中国人说天人合一嘛，大自然跟我们是息息相关的，所以你不会孤单，你要相信宇宙是友好的。啊，你为什么敢往前迈这一步？因为你知道这个地不会塌下去，你知道这个我们说中国人说天左善人啊，你要相信啊，这个老天是奖赏分明的，所以这样的话你就会很坦荡啊，不会恐惧。Go ahead, David.
Okay, so far we've covered what's happening, which is simply that we face multiple crises. Why is it happening? Because things have gotten out of balance. And now we get to the practical aspects. What can be done about the situation? And the first thing we're going to talk about, again, is in general terms. We have to remember that we create our own reality. So if we create it, we can uncreate it. We can change things for the better. So it's very empowering. Secondly, we need to reestablish balance by examining everything we think, everything we say, and everything we do. That's how we create our thoughts, our actions, our beliefs. And then we have to seek self-knowledge so that we understand ourselves. Why do we do what we do? Why do we think what we think? It's all an inside job. It has nothing to do with what's going around us. It's what's happening within us. So it requires taking personal responsibility. We can't look to others to help us solve our problems until we first solve the problems that are within us and that are the source of many of our problems. Chu?
那么具体怎么做呢？就你永远要记住啊，对这个现实你是有责任的，你也参与了创造啊。就一个家庭啊不和谐，天天打打闹闹，你是不是也有责任的，对吧？你拉这个脸，全家就还不幸福，对吧？所以你是有责任的。你改变了你自己，这个家庭也在发生变化，所以要重新呢确立这样一种平衡。那怎么呢？怎么重新确立平衡呢？就要通过呢考察、反思自己你所想的、你所说的、你所做的，你对家里是怎么想的？你是不是说了一些伤害别人的话？你是不是做了一些伤害家庭成员的事情啊？包括集体也是这样啊。这样的话呢，就是还有呢，要向内寻求啊，这是一个内在的工作，也就是说要寻求你的自我认知、自我知识啊、自知啊。这样的话，就是最后呢，你要呢自己担起责任来啊，负担起责任来，不要老指望别人改变，你先从自我改变做起啊。Go ahead。
So since we create our own reality, what can we do to more specifically? We'll get to the real details in a moment, but the first thing we can do is envision unity among all people. It's crazy how much division there is in the world. We're all the same. I've visited 50 countries in my life. Everybody has the same fears, the same desires, the same longing. If we could just realize that we're all the same and have our same emotions and same needs, the world would be a lot better place. Then we can choose our thoughts consciously. What does that mean? That means instead of thinking about things based on what someone has told us, we think about them and make our own mind up as to what makes sense and what is right. We don't judge ourselves or others. We don't see the full picture. We only see a part of it. So it's impossible to judge another person why they did what they did. If you could see the full picture, all their life, you would have a different understanding of why they did it and what their motivations were. We need to share resources. There's enough for everybody if we share. And if we don't share, we're creating a reality that we don't want, with full of conflict and fighting. We need to contribute to life based on our gifts and talents. We all have gifts and talents, and we just have to see what ours are and how we can help make a contribution. We have to live the golden rule. The golden rule is found in all cultures, and for good reason. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you is the one that I'm most familiar with. And if we understand that we're all the same, this is just a natural reaction that we should have. And finally, be grateful for everything you have. It may not be as much as you want, but be positive. If you're positive, you'll create a positive reality. If you're negative, you'll create a negative one. Jihu?
就是这个呢，就是这个我觉得挺重要的哈，大家也可以记一下。就是说，那个你要坚决的相信哈，万物一体啊，万物是一啊，就是我们跟天人是合一的啊，我们跟万物是一体的。还有呢，就是你要选择思想的时候呢，你要仔细的、谨慎的啊选择啊思想啊。那大家就说别，也就是说别人云亦云啊，别人说什么你就信什么，你要仔细想一想、听一听他说的有没有道理啊。第三呢，就是不要轻易的评判别人啊，说你是这个坏呀，你没有希望啊，没有前途啊，这些话是特别伤人的啊，不要轻易评判别人啊。还有第四也很重要，要学会分享啊，学会给予。你要比如说我没了，我给了他我就没了，你要相信这个宇宙的资源是丰富的啊。其实我们中国人喜欢说越给越有啊，道理是一样的。还有就是说那个你要呢，就是这个尽己所能做出贡献。当然也不是说一定要你说把你家里只有一袋米都给别人了，就是说你要根据你的才华、你的能力啊来做出贡献啊。你擅长什么，你就这方面就多多发挥啊，不要强己所难啊。还有第六条就是说要遵循黄军法则，也就是咱们中国人说的这个己所不欲，勿施于人啊。那个戴维·施沃伦博士已经走访了世界各地，足迹遍及了50多个国家，他发现人性是一样的啊。虽然我们颜色不一样啊，虽然肤色呀哈文化说的语言不一样，但是在心理上，人人都是人性本善的啊。所以这个黄金法则适用一切地方啊。最后呢，就是要有感恩之心啊，对你所拥有的，哎呀，表示感谢，别一天到晚的牢骚满腹，才给我这么点儿啊，这哪是不够，老是觉得不够，要有这样一种感恩之心，对拥有的东西要充分的这种感谢感恩啊。也就是说呢，要积极思考，你积极，你周围的世界就积极；你消极，你的世界就消极啊。Go ahead, David.
So in trying to figure out how to fix things, we talked about we have to change some of our thinking and some of our beliefs. Now let's get a little more specific, and we'll talk about the actions that we need to take to restore balance. Some of you may be familiar with what's called the natural step. It was created by an organization in Sweden in the late 1980s, and it was aimed at figuring out how to create a sustainable planet. And it uses systems thinking. Everything is connected to everything else. And they came up with 4 what they call systems conditions for a healthy ecosystem. And the 4 systems are, number 1, limit substances removed from the earth. Hugh, you want to go now or should I go on?
You can go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. The second is reduce persistent man-made substances. So in other words, let me just go back again. Limit substances removed from the earth. We can't take more from the earth than it's able to replenish naturally. We can't put into the earth things that are not biodegradable. They just lay in landfills, fill our waters and our air, and cause all kinds of pollution and toxins. And third, we need to minimize waste from old, obsolete products. Reuse them, recycle them, renew them. Let me stop there, Chu. You go ahead.
就是这个等于这个关于我们跟地球的关系啊，哈，有这样4条原则啊。其中第一条的话呢，就是要尽可能的减少从地球的那种榨取啊，还有呢，就是这个要减少呢这些人造的这个物品啊。你像现在这个牛仔裤啊，生产一条要花很多很多水啊，污染了这个河流哈。而且是生产出来之后卖不出去，最后又把它焚烧掉，又污染环境啊，像这些就是这样。还有就是要尽可能减少浪费啊，就是要尽可能的呢是废物利用啊，回收啊。Go ahead.
Okay, I didn't cover the 4th system condition because it's so important. I wanted to keep it separate. And it's something that you wouldn't think is part of a sustainable ecosystem, but it's meeting people's basic needs is crucial to having a healthy environment. And the reason for that is that people who are living in poverty care less about the environment. They're only worried about surviving for another day. So they'll use products and resources that are environmentally unhealthy and good for the planet. So we need to make sure that people have their basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter so that they also have a stake in having a healthy planet. And including in that, I add one other thing that's not part of the natural step, but I think is important, and that's to live within our means. As I mentioned before, many of us borrow a lot of money to take care of things that may be not essential. And all that money has to be repaid. Not only individuals, but countries are in the same position. And because we haven't lived within our means, we don't have the resources necessary to take care of the problems that we've created, be it climate change or the pandemic or environmental pollution. So we have to learn to live within our means and meet people's basic needs. Go ahead, Chu.
那个为什么把这个第4条原则要单独来讲啊？因为这个非常重要啊。其实这是有2个方面，第一方面就是说要满足人们的基本的物质需求啊。大家知道吃饭穿衣啊，要吃暖，要吃好啊，要吃饱啊，要穿暖啊，这是基本的啊。各国人民都有这个权利，所以这点一定要保障。还有呢，另一点也很重要，叫量力而行啊，量力而为啊，就是够了就是够了啊。就是大家知道这个中国有些贪官。100套房，其实最后1套也住不了，住到秦城那个监狱里去了啊！这就是这样。还有好多有些个别学生的话，几万块钱买个包啊，你就是学生上学嘛哈。你说你装书什么一个简单的包也就我估计10块20块也可以了，你没有必要用几万块钱要买一个包，这样为此你要借钱啊，借钱你要背上负担，你还不起怎么办？你人生一下就乱了套了啊！这就是不能量力而行。Go ahead, David.
So to create an ecological civilization, we've talked about many things that we can do, and let's just summarize them. We've just talked about the natural step. There's 4 system conditions, which is a framework for creating a sustainable, healthy ecosystem. That's environmentally. As far as social is concerned, we need to meet people's basic needs so that we have social equity and there's no conflict between people who don't have enough to eat. Then we have to live within our means. That'll create financial equilibrium. When we have done that, we'll have a much healthier civilization everywhere. And we have to create a reality that we want, things that we want in life, in the environment. And we do that through how we think, what we say, and how we behave. And the fundamental underlying principle behind all this is to acquire self-knowledge. Because as we do, we'll realize that there is nothing to fear. And when we realize there's nothing to fear, we won't resist the changes that have to be made. You?
就是要创造生态文明的话呢，我们刚才说了，我们首先要坚持那个4条原则哈，就跟大自然呢友好相处啊，不欲求欲语啊，不狂争暴敛啊，就是然后同时呢，我们也要强调这个社会的平等啊，不是这种像美国的话，这种贫富差距这么大啊，社会只要贫富差距悬殊，社会一定是动荡的，这是毫无疑问的啊。还有就是说那个要那个量力而行啊，这样的话呢就可以避免这种财务上的这样一种失衡啊失衡。你借太多的钱，难道你不还吗？啊，这样生活中一下就失去了平衡了啊。还有永远要记住的话呢，是我们创造了现实啊。这样的话，就说你的思想、你的言语、你的行为都对现实产生直接的影响啊。就是这样一个班集体啊，你的一句话，老师的一句话，一切可以把整个班的这个气氛就给改变了啊。所以我说一个学生的一个行动、一个行为、一个不好的行为，可以把整个班级这种和谐的气氛可以破坏了。所以你可见这个多重要了，我们每个人哈。那这样的话呢，就要最后也要意识到这种要自知啊，自我认识啊，了解你自己，要知道没有什么东西可以是恐惧的。我们中国人就喜欢说不论直道而行，不论东西啊，勇往直前。Go ahead.
Okay, before a final summary, let me just quote one more thing, because I think it's so important. We all want peace, world peace, and harmony. But we can only come by that as more people pursue a path of self-knowledge, which means understanding their innermost motives and feelings. Until we understand why we do what we do and why we think as we think, we can't create the kind of world we want. And this is
千
from
百年来，就是人类一直在追求世界的和平啊，和谐啊。那世界的和平跟和谐怎么才能达到呢？就是只能通过越来越多的个体，越来越多的个人来追求自我认识啊，自知啊，了解自己的内在的最根本的需求、跟动力、跟情感。Go ahead.
I should have mentioned this is from Pathwork, from one of the Pathwork lectures. There's 258 lectures. This is number 67. And all these lectures are available on the internet at the www.pathwork.org if you want to look at them. Okay, now we're going to summarize everything we've said. What's happening? Well, we face crises, pandemic, climate change, environmental degradation. All these things have to be handled and dealt with. Why are they happening? Because we've created extreme imbalances. And our fear overrides us taking action. And how do we fix things? We have to change what we think, what we say, and what we do. For those are the things that create the kind of reality that we want rather than the ones we don't want. So the responsibility is ours. We have to start and change ourselves, our beliefs, and our actions. And as we do, we'll create a world that is more to our liking. Jehu?
就是这个最后那个 David 施沃伦博士要概括一下他今天讲的， 就是首先就是描述一下今天世界的乱象啊，这个乱局乱象。那么为什么能够要发生这一切呢？是因为不平衡啊，出现了不平衡。这样的话就说这个呢，而且为什么有这些不平衡呢？是因为恐惧啊。那么如何克服恐惧呢？啊，那如何那个来改变今天这些现实呢？就是从我们自己做起，我们每个人都要有我们自己的担当，从认识我们自己做起，认识我们的所思所想所做做起。Go ahead。
Okay, so this is actually the end. I have up here the cover of a book I recently co-wrote, and as you learn about yourself through self-knowledge and realize you're part of a eternal soul and that you're safe and loved and have nothing to fear, your whole world changes, your whole worldview and all things that you think about what's important, what your priorities are, and what your values are. And you also realize that the end is just the beginning, where life just goes on and on in a circle. So I hope you have found this of value, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Jihu?
就是说那个因为 David 他也刚刚出版了一本新书哈、就是这个就是将快乐带进你的生活中，带进你的生活中。就是说呢，如果我们能知道万物一体，我们可是万物跟其他万物连在一起的，我们跟其他人是一体的，你就不会有恐惧哈、当你意识到你对这个世界是世界，你对世界的责任的话，你了解你自己之后。你就会激发你对世界做出你应有的贡献啊，这个世界就会越来越美好，生态文明也就会早日实现。这是他的这个
Okay.
联系方式啊，大家如果有问题的话，以后可以给他写信啊。然后我们的下一步呢，我们进入这个问答阶段啊。David 他故意留出点时间，他特别喜欢跟听众互动哈、大家如果有问题的话，请不用客气啊。我看琼辉在，琼辉你有问题吗？
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Wang Lashi. Thank you. Um, yeah, I'd like to ask a question. Uh, I just wonder because many people in today's world do not admit the existence of souls. My question is, what might be the influences to the environment or maybe to ecological civilization, if people don't don't admit the existence of souls, because just now Dr. David has mentioned several times the importance of knowing oneself and the influence of knowing oneself and the acknowledgement of the existence of souls to their behaviors. So I just want to know from your point of view, what might be the consequences when people don't admit the existence of souls. Yeah. Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It's sort of like anything else. If you don't know something, you're not going to make the best decisions or the best choices in your life. And if you don't know that you are part of a soul, you don't probably know that you are loved and that you're eternal and that you're perfectly safe. So you're going to do things and believe things that are not in your best interest. So like anything else that you don't know, if you don't know something, you're not going to be able to understand the full picture and to live your life in a way that will be best for you. So I hope that answers your question.
重辉你就自己直接把你的问题跟他的回答一块儿翻译了吧，你外语这么好。
好的，好的，好的，就是我的问题就是说，当今世界许多人都不认可灵魂的存在，但是David 博士呢一直在提，就是我们对认识自己和对认可这个灵魂的存在，对我们的行为会造成很多影响，以及对环境都会造成影响。所以我的问题就是说，如果人们不认可灵魂的存在，会对我们今天的生态文明建设带来怎样的一个影响？刚才David 博士呢，他就回答说是，我们对灵魂的认知，如果我们不认可这个灵魂的存在，我们就不会对自己有最好的认知，那么我们的这个行为呢，我们就不会，我们的行为就不会产生最好的结果。大概我就是这么听到几句，我有时候记不好啊，就忘了，就是抱歉啊，就这么多。然后王老师你可以补充一下，如果有缺失啊，谢谢。
Jihu?
其他问题。大家还有什么其他问题没有？嗯。
Jihu, can you
就是说，
translate
那
that
个
for
其
me?
实刚才那个琼辉博士，咱们北师大的博士问的也挺好。其实就是说，其实主要就是想说，其实我们大部分时间，我们其实只是注意我们的肉体、身体，我们只是把自己看作一个，说白了不好听话，就是行尸走肉啊，吃饱没有，穿饱没有。其实你还有灵魂的，对吧？哈，你这也就是说，你是个高尚的存在，这个很重要。啊，生态文明也是不是说仅仅是让大家开豪车、吃什么开宝马什么就行了，也就是说你要提升你的灵魂、精神层面，也就是咱们中国人说精神文明啊，很重要，这点非常非常重要。一个有精神文明的话，一个是有这个灵魂高尚的人的话，其实物质这些东西吧，差不多也就得了，就不会那么追求这些东西。那些东西容易把人往这个歪了领，而这个你要是追求精神高尚的人的话，往往就是容易就是走向一个提升啊，这生命也得到提升，我觉得这很重要，对吧？OK，大家还有没有其他问题？大家可以把放入问题这个问题那个聊天框也行，我可以帮助大家翻译一下，如果用中文提问也可以啊。Don't be shy，OK，别不好意思哈，就是你认识你害怕的
Let- let-
话，Go ahead，
Jihu, Jihu,
go
let me,
yeah，
I thought of a good example for the first question.
嗯
Um, I believe that the question was, if you don't know you have a soul, how does that impact your life? And it's like if you don't know anything, but for instance, if you don't know that the world is round, you're going to restrict yourself as to what you can do and how safe you can feel. So you won't go out past a mile or two out in the ocean if you think that you might fall off. And the same thing, if you don't know that you have a soul, you're going to make choices and decisions that are not in your best interest. Um, and you won't know that you're eternal and that you are safe and and that you have nothing to fear. So hopefully that's an example that would illustrate what I was trying to say.
就是要随时认识到你是一个精神的存在，是个高尚的灵魂的存在。这时候呢，这样的话呢，你就会能看到一个比一般人看到一个更大的图景啊，看到万物互联，你就不会因为匮乏而感到恐慌，你就觉得会勇往直前啊。你相信，就我们中国人说“越葛越有”啊，确实是这样的啊。我刚才看这个聊天框里头，樊老师提到一个，对生态文明来说，现代工业文明是个低纬度的文明，也可以这么说，也可以说生态文明 对公有文明实行了降维打击，对吧？哎大家还有什么其他问题，尽管问好了。
We could do some exercises if you want
Yeah,
to.
okay, yeah.
Okay. So I have a couple of exercises that, and they're not physical exercises, but that's the picture I'm using. And what I'd like everyone to do is to look at some of these areas in your life, your work, your play, your health, your quiet time, when you're giving or receiving, and your time in nature. Pick one of these based on which you think is more out of balance in your life, which one needs more balance to make your life more enjoyable and harmonious. So this is something you can do at home. You might want to just write down these things and pick the one that you think you need to work on to establish better balance. And this should be helpful to you as you go about your day. And so this is one exercise that I think everybody can make use of. And then there's a second one. Oh, you've written down the different choices. The second one is a thought exercise. And what I want everyone to do is to observe your thoughts throughout the day and, and observe how often your thoughts dwell on the past, what percentage of the time, what percentage of the time do you have fearful thoughts, what percentage do you have loving thoughts, and what percentage do you focus on spiritual aspects of life. And this will give some insights to where you're spending your time, where you're focusing your attention, and whether or not this is productive for you, whether this is the best way to spend your day. So write those down, and you can do this at home,
And
or you
David,
we could,
would you mind me translation?
yeah. Oh no, sorry.
Yeah，那个 David 说，因为大家他已经给大家准备了几个这个思想练习啊，我觉得挺重要的。但是这平时我们一说老师锻炼，老师到这个健身房去锻炼啊，其实我们思想也可以练一练啊，拿出来练练。你怎么练呢？你可以观察一下你的思想，你的全天候，你的思想，你的在想什么啊？你比如说你呢，你多长时间？是不是经常沉眠在过去啊？是不是呢？老是感到恐惧、害怕？是不是充满了爱啊？是不是呢？是把这精力放在那个自己的精神层面啊？这是每天你可以全天候想一想，观察一下我这一天从早上起来到晚上睡觉这期间，我是不是有这些？我是怎么？是不是有这些行为啊？大家琢磨琢磨。David, can you back to the last page, the former page?
Sure, sure.
Yeah. 还有呢，就是那个这个第二个练习的呢叫 balance check，也就是检查检查你的生活中是不是有失衡的地方啊，比如你的工作中是不是有失衡的地方，你的游戏啊这个业余时间或者你的这个业余时间是不是有失衡的地方，是不是工作太多了，没有时间自己享受啊，这也算失衡了啊。还有就像你的健康是不是出了问题啊？还有这个安静的时间，你每天给没给自己的安静的时间，还是天天这个鱼山肉海的呼朋引类的啊？如果那样的话，就又失衡了啊。还有是不是仅仅是容易接受别人的礼物，从不给别人礼物，这说明也是失衡了。还有是不是这个花多长时间在自然中啊？就是这样的话，这个你要可以这个7项啊，大家一一的可以自己做做练习，思考一下，这也没人盯着你自己哈， 躺在床上也好，坐在那儿可以想一想哈啊，我在工作中是不是有失衡的地方啊？我在这个业余时间，我的健康，我的安静的时间，我的给啊，我的是不是收受啊，给予和接受啊，是不是都有失衡的啊？如果一个人老给，如果一点也不接受，这也是不对的啊。还有我花没花时间在自然中？我们在座的有没有同学今天或老师，我们看没看天空？我们看没看月亮？看没看太阳？我记得咱们有一个河北有名的诗人海的嘛，也是我们北大的这个校友，他说：“人呐，你生活在世上，你要看看太阳。”特别喜欢这句话。我们大部分人活了一生，我没好好看看太阳，也就是我没有花时间在自然上啊，这说明你生活是失衡了的。Go ahead, David,
Um,
please.
Perhaps someone in the audience would like to uh, share their thoughts about where their life is either in good balance or out of balance and needs to be brought back into balance.
David, there's a question from the Wuhan University.
Okay,
Uh,
so let's
it's
go on to that.
his question is that how should we change the current situation of environmental situation and self-knowledge, how self-knowledge can make a contribution to ecological civilization. Yeah, look like summarize what you just talked in the whole lecture, right? Yeah, yeah.
So, well, technology can make a contribution. There's no question about it. Um, it helps us to know more, to have more information than we could have otherwise. And information is always helpful. The problem is that we rely on technology as the be all and end all, as something that will solve our problems. And most of our problems are um, are what's are based on our thinking and based on our beliefs uh, that create the actions that we do in the world. If we can get our thinking straight, a lot of our problems would clear up. And technology won't be able to help those things. It can help. It can help in a lot of different ways, but it won't be the ultimate answer. And that's something that, um, unfortunately, more people we rely on technology because it's out there and it's not work that we have to do. We can allow others to do it, and that's not going to solve the problems that we need to solve.
就是那个，因为可能戴维他没怎么，可能也许没听清楚我刚才的翻译。其实这位同学的话呢，我建议咱们这个唐同学吧，唐伯良同学问题问的挺好。其实他今天等于这个他整个演讲等于都回答了你这个问题哈。我是不是也来的比较晚呢？我看等于你可以到时候明天那个北大那个回放的时候可以再听一下啊。我觉得基本上就回答了，就是主要是我们自己。确实是可以从改变我们自己的自我认知做起，改变我们对社会的认知做起，改变我们对整个宇宙的认知做起啊。这个改变之后，你变了，世界也就变了啊。我觉得是这么个思路啊。OK，还有没有其他问题？我今天看来了不少咱们这个哈师大的不提点问题啊？People probably shy, worry about lost faith, right?
是的，是的，谁来提一下？
对
平常思考挺多的，那就提一下吧。谁
对呀、
来？
可以结合教育嘛，对吧？也可以。
研一的呢？易玉婵，你们呢？在吗？易玉婵、张迪，
在老师，
嗯，
把你们的
把研二
怀的海用，把你们的怀的海用上。
杨小陈还有王宁，你们研三，小陈你们研二。
对，王宁有什么问题没有？王宁，
机会难得。
对呀、那个 Dr. David Schwerin visit China almost every year, before the COVID-19. Right now, it's hard to travel to China. So that's a good chance for you to ask a question, yeah, through the online. Yeah. 来问吧。
发在聊天上也行，完了大家都能看到，也挺好的，我
对对对，
觉得嘛，
那也行，
做的。
也可以，对。If you feel shy, you can put it into the chat. Your question into chat. OK。哎呀，可能刚才那个等于重回提醒了一下我，等于他这个反复刚才回答咱们那个武汉那个梁同学的问题的时候也谈到过，当今的一个重要的问题就是要克服技术依赖。好多人就说啊、我们这个到时候科学发展了，技术发展了就可以解决问题了哈，我们不需要做什么，我们可以 business as usual，我们照常进行就可以了，然后科学会解决问题啊。咱们如果汽车污染，我们会发现电动汽车是吧？然后那个新能源就解决了。那我们这样的话，我们是不是可以继续污染呢？啊，还不是根本的解决问题，所以不能太依赖于技术。要根本的解决呢，还是要从我们自己的认知的改变，改变我们的思维方式，我们的世界观啊，这个很重要啊。我觉得这个自我改变太重要了啊。OK，什么其他问题没有？我看严老师，你先提个问题吧。
我个人是，问题呢，我倒谈不上，我在一直思考着，然后
嗯，
我也觉得，戴维教授说的，我们都处在关系当中，然后
对，
那个，关系当中，联系当中，我们要像王老师也谈到，我们在这关系当中、联系当中，对这些世界面临的应用怎么做，可能是还是从我们自己开始，想起王老师说的。天下兴亡就在你我。
你我，
对，
对，
有时候我会
嗯
觉得是我们可能心理认知更重要一点，而且在这个认知也是有点要处理好一些问题。比如说我们是这样认知的，可是到现实当中碰壁，可能会觉得，哎呀，我怎么吃亏的总是我呢？可能怎么一种超越也蛮重要的，一种思考，有一种超脱，有一种定力，你的精神上有一种信念吧。可能也是蛮重要的，或许能够坚
嗯
持很久，走得很久，否则你的那种认知就会被现实所动摇，可
嗯
能会从众或随波逐流，或许
嗯
有这样的，所以我觉得认知还是蛮重要的，可能有助于
嗯
你坚定一种信念，
嗯
按你的节奏去生活，不为所动。当然，我们这个不为所动，也不是说排斥一些合理的建议，嗯，
嗯。
这也是我刚才听到大家对话的一些感想和感悟，嗯。
David, Professor Yang Li from Harbin Normal University. Yeah, she's our good friend. Probably you met her when you were in China. She just want to share what she learned from your lecture, your wonderful lecture. But in this, they said what you talk is very wonderful ideas, but in reality, sometimes the people, they feel uncomfortable. For example, some they complain why I gave I didn't receive, right? Yeah, I help others, other people didn't help me. Sometimes people feel unhappy about that. Yeah. How do you answer this question? Yeah,
About giving and receiving.
yeah,
Well, in in uh, in the information that I've received and my experiences, giving and receiving are really the same thing. What we give to another person we're really giving to ourselves, because we're all connected. And what we fail to give to another person, we fail to give to ourselves. Now, it doesn't appear that way when we look out, we look like we're all separate, but the truth is we're not. And so giving and receiving are the same. If I want to give something to Chihu and he doesn't want to accept it, then I can't give it. So the two are connected. You have to be able to do both sides of it in order to complete the transaction, so to speak. And as we give, it's like a glass of water. Until you reduce the amount of water in the glass, no more can be received. You have to give something in order to receive more. So the two are completely connected. And as you give more, you receive more. If you don't give anything, you won't receive anything. So it's a very good question, and it's one that many people ponder, but if you really look at it closely, they're the same thing, just two sides of the same coin.
那个戴维树人这回答，我觉得也回答特别好啊。这个杨老师的问题也问的特别好。其实我们生活中有时候经常我们觉得吃亏了啊，我们心里不平衡，为什么吃亏的总是我啊？老是这么想，我给了这么多，我没得到应有的回报啊，这心里就不平衡，所以人们就不，也许就好多人就因此就不愿意做好事儿了啊。就是戴维事务的人看来就觉得，如果你觉得自己吃亏的话，那说明什么呀？说明你依然还是用分离思维在起作用。还是把别人看的是跟我不同的人，跟你分开的，把你跟宇宙看的是分开的。如果你看都是万物一体的话，我跟他人是一体的话，你就不会这么看了。就举个例子来说，其实很简单，妈妈从不觉得她给女儿给多了，吃亏了，她半夜起来奶着孩子喂孩子，自己没睡好觉啊，她也不会抱怨啊。你看我半夜起来了，你这小不点儿的，搞得我睡不好觉，她不会这么说。啊，因为他知道儿子、孩子、女儿，儿子跟他是一体的啊，就是这个。其实我觉得，从我跟樊老师生活中，我们也体会到所谓越给越有哈，就是你给了之后，你这一天你自己就很快乐，你不用说到晚上再收获，你给别人一朵鲜花，晚上再收获一鲜花，不是那么机械的理解啊。其实你在给的过程中，你这个给的行为本身你就很快乐了啊。所以中国人说助人为乐嘛。对吧？你很快，这一天很快乐，你还要怎么样？你给了一束花，你一天搞得你那么快乐，其实已经大大的收获了。你没必要晚上再给得到另一束花，你才觉得得到心理平衡啊。当你如果从样一种有机整体的有 treated the whole universe as organic whole，那你觉得万物一体，我们是一家人，就是不一样了啊。这种感觉就特别好。你觉得这个世界也很大了，我就是宇宙，I am the universe。Universe is me，你就会理解为什么王阳明说“我心便是宇宙，宇宙便是我心”啊，或者这些说个体是宇宙的合生，道理是一样的啊。所以这个分离的思想啊，导致了好多人间的这种不高兴啊、不幸福和悲剧。而这样一种有机整合联系的思维的话，会使你幸福的，或者说选择了一种哲学，就选择了一种人生。我觉得是这样的。OK。Probably David, I talk too much, probably. Yeah. OK，大家还有什么其他问题？OK，我们这儿有一个，我看这位这个同学，咱们先生的话，你就直接用，我看英文这么好，你就问吧，好吧？嗯David, can you see the chat? There is a comment or question there. That's the comment. Dr. Schwerin's discussion on fear is very illuminating to me. It's practical as well. We need to constantly remind ourselves to take the dialectical or interconnected perspective when we are ourselves in fear. Many thanks to Dr. Schwelin's talk and to Dr. Wang's excellent interpretation. Yeah, it's a comment. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
谢谢赵元先生啊，谢谢。我就爱听这些表扬的话啊，这一天都特高兴。OK，如果大家都没问题的话，我们今天就到这里哈。大家如果以后有问题，想起问题来了啊，或者在思想练习中有什么有什么具体的问题，可以写信啊，给 David 施沃伦博士啊，you can contact Dr. 施沃伦 through email 啊。就让我们掌声对Dr. 施沃伦博士表示感谢。Let's give a big thank you to Dr. 施沃伦 for his wonderful lecture.
王老师，就是
Yeah,
不好意思再打断一下，就是
go ahead.
后面还有一个，就是刚才 David 他说了一个点，我觉得挺重要的，就是刚才你没有就是忘掉了说，可能我想补充一下，可以吗？
说，go ahead。
就是 David 他说，这个就是给予和获得它的这个互联关系的时候，他举了一个那杯水的例子，他就像一杯水。你只有这个给出去一部分，你才能才能又装进来。所以先的给予出去，然后你才能获得一些。所以就是刚才樊老师说的什么，得失那个失得失的，应该是，
对，
就是那个水，我觉得挺形象的。好，谢谢。
呀，David, Dr. Chung Hui, really appreciate your metaphor about the glass of water. Yeah, really,但是如果你老是那么满的话，你永远接受不了。你要给出去，你才能空出来啊。我觉得这个是也很符合辩证法很有道理。Also, there is from UN, a young fellow said, "Thanks a lot for your presentation. It helped me to rethink of myself." Yeah, great. 行，那就如果大家有问题的话sometimes I'm too business I'm too busy to pay attention to myself，是吧？可能是这个意思。就是咱们这个在群里头有一个小伙伴来自联合国的少年说感谢这个演讲这个演讲帮助他思考他自己。有时候他太忙了，没有时间关注自己我想不是他的问题，我们每个人大概都有这么我们太忙了，我们忙着挣钱，忙着挣名声忙着扩大影响，忙着让别人知道我们自己，我们很少给点时间给我们自己所以我觉得这个很对的。然后那个天翔呢，中科大的，他觉得，我觉得这个概括也对，就是外观世界，内观自己，我是 look inside ourselves 所以这个还有就是这个樊老师说呢，我们要 love ourselves，take good care of ourselves，leave some time to ourselves，starting from leaving some time for ourselves，我觉得这很重要我们就现代人都太忙了，忙着外在的事情，我们没有时间给我们自己。在这意义上来讲，其实我们很自私的你老说爱自己，爱自己，你都不给自己时间，你怎么爱自己呀？对吧？我们看一个人是不是爱一个事物，是不是看我们花没花时间在他身上你爱自己，你没有给时间给自己，你叫什么爱呀？所以这个琼辉说呢，这个Dr. 琼辉 said this the thought exercise very important 就是 the how do you keep the balance in your life is very important。所以大家就是要回去可以把这个思想练习可以好好练练。这个其实也不花你一分钱，躺在床上是吧？就可以把这一天回忆一下工作中、生活中、家庭中，你是不是有不平衡的地方那如果你生活中不幸福、不快乐，那一定是在某个环节、在某个方面陷入了不平衡If you don't feel happy, that means there must be in some aspect, some respect in your life is in imbalance 所以这个大家琢磨琢磨，可能是这样的就是这个，所以这个联合国这个少年又说这个mindfulness is very important, is the key to change 也就是所谓咱们就是正念吧正念的奇迹其实就是David emphasized the thought self knowledge 其实也是等同于我们所说的这个 mindfulness 啊，就是正念啊，正念，佛教讲正念。OK，大家看还有什么问题？现在慢慢问题好像多起来了。OK，嗯嗯，这个哈师大的张迪说，the student from Harbin Normal University said, changing our perception to deal with new problems. 呀，是啊，阿迪，you are a smart girl 啊，很聪明。
Is that a question for me?
If you
May
if you like, go ahead.
may I raise a question?
Yeah.
Thank
Can
you
you
so much for
你自我介绍一句行吗
okay. Actually, I saw this presentation in the WeChat group
？OK
of 绿发会. Yeah.
OK
And I really enjoy this morning because we are doing some work to promote the Chinese youth to participate in some global issues, focusing on sustainable development goals achievement. During time, we found that we need more like sharing or circulating some good ideas and also some methods and some way how to protect the environment or to promote some like econness. But I think from this morning, it's really important to first pay attention to ourselves. But my question is, when individual living in a contacting world and we have to face some relations or some connecting and some feedback from the outside world, how to make it in a more balanced way and how to keep yourself in your own way of living. It's always a question and very sometimes it's very difficult. Is there any way to help to form a networking or a supporting environment in such a, how to say, conflict or some complex context? That's my question. I don't know if I make it clear.
How to connect with others in to make the world a better place? Is that the question?
Yes, because sometimes we are living in a more difficult or complex context in terms of the social condition. So how to make ourselves better and also to connect to the outside more easier or make the environment more friendly to each other. But I think this question is so big. It's just sometimes I will think about.
Well, you ask a very important question. How do we come together? We're all in this together. We're all connected, and it's craziness, foolishness, the way we all pretend we're separate and that we can solve any of the problems, these big problems, without working together. Now, how you actually do that? One way is through the internet. There are plenty of organizations that are involved in all phases of the environmental problems and pandemic and climate change. And so you can certainly connect with any of these organizations. Most of them have facilities or offices in China. I was reading about one just today that the natural path. The natural step, which I talked about, has a facility in China. Environmental Defense Fund, which is not a good name for the organization, but nevertheless, they do wonderful work in China as well as around the world. And you can just Google these organizations, get in touch with them, send them an email and say, I'd like to be involved and help in some way. Can you give me some ideas as to how I can be helpful? And we all have different skills and different talents that we can contribute, and that's how we're going to solve our problems, when more and more people volunteer to work together based on their understanding that we can't solve any of these problems by ourselves. We have to work together. And the universe is sort of telling us this. It's saying these problems are too big to work out on an individual basis or a country by country basis. If you don't all cooperate, you'll all be adversely affected. So you have some good ideas, and it's great to hear that you want to get involved. And just Google whatever your particular interest is, or maybe Google's not the right term. WeChat, use WeChat or whatever else is available to you to find out who is involved in these activities and contact them and say, I'd also like to participate. And here's some of the things that I'm willing to do or I'm able to do. So, I applaud you for wanting to do that. And it's important that everybody get involved, because it's all our personal responsibility. And we can't shift the responsibility to somebody else. We have to do our own part. It may not be huge, but if everyone contributes, we'll make the world a better place.
Thank you very much, David. It's a wonderful explanation. 我想就说这个，其实我理解这个也很重要哈，就是说，虽然我们要从自我做起，要改变自己哈，但是我们也需要外援啊，David 是这个意思。也就是说呢，用我们过程这些就特别强调 community，也建立一个共同体啊，大家相互支持啊，没有人就是说没有人是个孤岛，nobody is an island，是吧？所以我们就也需要一个好汉，中国人说一个好汉三个帮，是吧？就是一个篱笆三个桩啊。这为什么就是这个？所以这样的话呢，在共同体中呢，我们就可以大家互相打气啊，这个非常重要，可以强化你自己的这种自己的理念啊，大家互相支持很重要。这是为什么这个哈师大他们那个阅读淮的海这么厉害啊？他们已经4、5年了在坚持读，这几十个人一块读下来的话，那能量就很大了，气场也很足啊。我希望这个咱们这个联合国的咱们这个青年的话呢，也组织你的 community， 形成你的圈子啊。这慢慢这圈子越来越大，慢慢就影响就像一个ripple 啊，一个石头扔到湖里去，影响越来越大啊。所以这共同体越来越大，最后影响整个世界啊。所以这个 community 特别重要啊，要想办法要形成这么个 community， 不要做独狼啊，不要做独狼。Well, I've got another question, David. Can you see the chat? No,
I don't see anything.
no many teenagers. Okay, let me read it. Okay, so what's this here? Now many teenagers cannot have a self recognition correctly and have no positive life goals. When they encounter setbacks, they even want to commit suicide. What do you think society, educators, and parents can do to help those teenagers to have a positive attitude toward life? Yeah. So there are a lot of young people commit suicide right now today. Yeah. So as an educator, or parents, how can help them from doing that? Yeah.
Well, each case is individual. It's hard to generalize. Certainly, we need the teenagers to have hope and to have a good self-image, and to be cared for in the best way possible. It's very hard to generalize as to how do you solve this type of problem, because everybody has slightly different characteristics, and I guess the underlying answer is to care for the person, show them that you love them, show them that there is hope, because there is, even though it's a difficult time, and support them in every way possible, and ask them to do some inner work themselves, find out why they're thinking that way, and what their beliefs are, and are their beliefs accurate? Are things helpless, or are there answers out there, and see what kind of resources are available to make the person's life better. I know that's a pretty general answer, but each case is individual.
那个刚才施伦博士说这个问题也问的特别好哈，就是说，但是就是说像这个自杀的问题呀，很难把它就是有一个包治百病的这种灵丹妙药啊，因为每个个案的这个情况不一样，有的可能是跟他的家庭有关系啊，有的可能跟他个人的这个性格有关系啊哈，叫个案处理哈。但是有一点是应该是一个基本的。就是说首先要树立一个生活的意义啊，生活的目标，还要树立一个良好的自我感觉的形象啊。好多那个自杀者就觉得好像我没什么用啊，我是一个废人啊，我觉得没什么，我没有存在的价值，所以他才走向自杀啊。要改变自我的认知，这很重要。同时呢，要在周围呢形成那样一个积极的那样一个圈子，就像刚才咱们跟联合国这个青年朋友说的一样，这个圈子之后就互相打气，互相支持。这个气场也很重要，形成这么一个积极的场域也很重要啊。OK，如果没有问题的话，我们今天就到这里，好吧？那我们再次把这个给Dr. 施伦一个大大的掌声啊，表示感谢。Thank you, David. Yeah,
Thank you,
You're very
David.
welcome.
yeah,
Thank you, and thank you for everybody for
Thank you.
listening.
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's time to go to bed. OK，啊，那个华盛顿那边也太
Carry
晚了，太晚了，华盛顿那边太
他们
晚了。
那边9点钟了，晚上9点
啊，
了。
才9点，这么
啊，
早？
他们9点了，他们就该晚上9点，他们一般差不多9点钟就要
睡觉
上床了。对，因为他们的作息时间是很健康的一种吧。
healthy
对对对
lifestyle。
好。
Yeah，
行，谢谢各位啊，谢谢各位的聆听，坚持到最后啊！我看还有这么多人在听，很好，非常感谢。咱们继续保持联系啊！大家有问题的话，可以直接给受人写信啊。而且大家如果以后到美国来，他欢迎到他家去做客，他们家永远是欢迎中国朋友啊，非常漂亮。谢谢大家，
OK，谢谢大家，咱们下次再见。
下次再见啊。
OK，
谢
拜拜
谢咱们
，David。
是
Thank you
王老
so
师
much.
Bye.
Have a
David。
good
Thank you so
night.
much. Good
Good
night.
night.